And welcome back to the Weekly Why. This week we have Parsha Noach. This is the second Parsha in the Torah. And this week we cover essentially everything after Adam. Well, not everything after Adam. And we start right at essentially the introduction of Noah, right up until the flood, his death, and then right up immediately introducing the father of Abraham. So this is essentially the middle ground between Noah and Abraham. So there are a million and one things we can discuss in terms of the state of the world, the meaning of the flood, the significance. One of the things I'd like to take a look at, though, is the rainbow. The rainbow we see in the 9th chapter of the book of Genesis. This is the sign, the symbol that God provides to the people after the flood. Now, it says, it's a reminder to the world, in terms of God's, vow never to destroy the world again. And so most of the commentators, such as Nachmanides, they point out that this rainbow really signifies God's benevolence towards the world. That, the world really messed up in Noah's time, such depravity, and yet this rainbow represents and symbolizes the fact that God has made a vow, a commitment to never destroy humanity again. However, there are some differing perspectives on this. One of them is from Rabbi Eliezer ben Elijah Ashkenazi. He lived about 500 years ago, and he wrote a book called Maseh Hashem, The Works of Hashem. And one of the ideas that he wrote on this rainbow is not that this rainbow represents the benevolence of Hashem in a way, in the sense that God is so kind and giving, that humanity, we've really turned a corner since the time of Noah. Quite the opposite, in fact. In fact, the word used in chapter 9, verse 16, is telling us to remember. So the rainbow is a reminder for us. It's a symbol of the covenant. It's not for God's purpose, right? It's a sense. The entire purpose of the rainbow, is for humanity to remember. So the question is, well, what are we supposed to remember by the rainbow? So what we're supposed to remember is, in fact, how true the absolute depravity of the world in Noah's time, and yes, God's benevolence, but at the same time we need to look at that and take a real practical side to it and say, if during that time humanity was so depraved and so horrible and just on such an unbelievably low level, and it needed to go through that kind of a painful cleansing process as it did, this rainbow is a sign that, really, we haven't really changed that much. That ultimately this is a sign that, what? God's not promised not to do it again, but it doesn't necessarily mean we've really turned a corner here. And so I think this is a really, really appropriate lesson, especially coming, 18 days, I think, after Yom Kippur, is that we need to be looking at this and saying, well, Yom Kippur was less than 3 weeks ago. I stood there and I was making vows and I was beating my chest and I was saying, I vow to do this and I'm going to fix myself and I'm going to focus on this. And I think this is a really good opportunity. There are a million good opportunities, but this is a great opportunity to look back, when we read about the rainbow and we say, okay, this is a lesson for us. We're supposed to see this. We're supposed to say, wow, in many ways we're deserving of certain punishments, with the destruction that maybe we should have received, but that God has vowed we're not. So in terms of only a few weeks after Yom Kippur, we have to look and say, well, on my own personal vows and my own personal self-improvement, where exactly am I sitting right now? Am I where I want to be? Am I where I should be? Where am I looking? Because we can look at this 8-10 months later, but we're only a couple weeks later. We probably still remember Yom Kippur very, very fresh. So I think that's hopefully something that should be pretty clean in our minds and pretty clear, and that we should be able to sit down and think about this and say, am I really deserving, if God's granting me another year, am I really deserving, based on my decisions in the last 17, 18 days. So I hope that certainly it is something that we can be proud of, and if it's not something we can be proud of, at least, it'll only be 17 days in that we figured it out instead of 350 days later. And so I just want to end with another point from Rabbi Hirsch, Samson Raphael Hirsch. Talks about the kind of the composition of the rainbow. It's a very nice little idea, but it makes us, should give us a nice little chizuk, strength and a boost when we're a little bit overwhelmed and saying, oh my gosh, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, Yom Kippur, I vowed to do this, that, and the other, and oh my gosh, I haven't done any of this stuff. So it's interesting what he says. Is just as the rainbow is comprised of 7 different colors, is that the rainbow is essentially symbolic of the variety of humanity. What he says is the following: all the different shades of mankind, from the most spiritual who radiates his spirituality to the most material person, in whom Hashem's light glimmers but faintly, are joined together in life. It sounds very nice and very nice and airy, but ultimately the lesson for us is that it can be pretty tough looking back and how we should have done so many things over the last 3 weeks since Yom Kippur. But ultimately, if we realize that we're not alone, everyone's in this together, and that should give us a bit of chizuk, a bit of strength to realize that we may not be perfect, but together we certainly have a great deal of strength that we can move forward together. So my blessing and hope for us is that we can read this parsha, we can read upon the rainbow, and hopefully have an understanding of that. When I look back at that, when I look back of some of what we should have, the punishments that we should have had in the past, and the ways we can correct ourselves to ensure that we really do deserve the vow to never have us punished once again. So that's it for Parsha Noach. Best wishes, Shabbat Shalom, and God bless.